In this video, I want to talk about why voltage is important. Should you have any questions at all, I encourage you to drop a comment down below. I'll do my best to assist in the best possible direction. If you find this video helpful, consider giving my video a thumbs up and subscribing to my YouTube channel, as I would greatly appreciate your support. Voltage is one of those things that we shouldn't overlook, and if we do, it's definitely 110% positively going to impact our results that we are getting within our work. Right here, I have the Fundamental Tattoo Handbook. This is now available on my Amazon author page and or Barnes & Noble's. I'll leave my Amazon affiliate links and other affiliate links for you in the description below, or you can head on over to Amazon or Barnes & Noble's, type in Daniel Yuck. This book will pop right on up. The Fundamental Tattoo Handbook is a fantastic handbook to go ahead and get more familiar with not only the basics of tattooing, you can also practice right in the back of this book. But within the Fundamental Tattoo Handbook, I have various pages covering the art of understanding vibrations and voltages, so that we can kind of pick what ballpark you're going to be sitting in based on what gear you're using. The Fundamental Tattoo Handbook is loaded with useful information for beginners to advanced tattoo artists, and everything is delivered in a fun illustrative format that makes it easy for you to understand. Once again, this book is actually available on Amazon and Barnes & Noble's. It's called the Fundamental Tattoo Handbook. This is a crucial resource to anyone who is either looking to get into tattooing, simply want to collect tattoos, or an artist who wants to understand more. Within this book, we talk about everything from shading to lining, giving you different examples, how deep we should be going, angles as well, and everything in between. We talk about different ointments, what blowouts are. And right here you can kind of see we go more in depth about understanding different voltages and how they affect us when we tattoo. So once again, this book is called the Fundamental Tattoo Handbook, and it is now available on Amazon's and Barnes & Noble. And at the end of it, you can see where we have exercises where everything that we learn and figure out in the book, we could practice in the back, from lining, shading. We can do some exercises, and we can practice either directly in the book, or we can do some slits right here and then put in some tracing paper and practice right over, so that we preserve the book. And we can use a tattoo machine also to practice within the book to get the absolute most. That would apply to any one of my tattooing workbooks. For example, you see this is Stencil Focus Statue Edition, which kind of mimics us working on a tattoo stencil. This is the book that I'm going to be using to get my points across here in this voltage video. However, I felt like it was an important detour to make note of this with you all, to let you know that these resources do exist. Again, links will be for you in the description below. I'm going to touch base on some important fundamentals when it comes to voltages. Now, why voltage is important, it doesn't matter what application we are doing. We could be packing, shading, lining, dot work. Voltage is one of the bare bone variables that we must consider when picking any sort of technique for any style. Voltage definitely does go a long way. So what that means is if we didn't put enough thought to our voltage, then over time we're going to be experiencing some sort of, adversities within our work, because whatever style we may be doing may not be fully aligned for the voltage range that's best for that application. I hope that makes sense. Again, I do go further more into this within the Fundamental Tattoo Handbook, and I break it down in an easy to understand manner over the course of pages, as opposed to putting it into one video. Let's get into the bare bone fundamental. This is the rule of thumb to remember. The lower the voltage, the slower the rounds are made with a needle. So what that means is this is going to be 1 round, 2 rounds, 3 rounds. The lower the voltage, the less rounds our needle is going to make per second per minute. The higher the voltage, the more rounds the needle is going to make per second per minute. That is the rule of thumb to remember. That's the basis that we're going to be kind of working off of, that theory right there. Once again, the higher the voltage, the more rounds the needle is going to make. The lower the voltage, the less rounds the needle is going to make. That right there is literally the ticket front. That right there is very, very important to remember. So let me show you. Right now, I have the Inlumino Electric Pen Dot Pro for ballpoint cartridges. This is an Inlumino ballpoint cartridge in which I will be using to get my points across. The exact same fundamentals are going to translate on over to tattooing, so me using a ballpoint pen is besides the point. Fundamentals will still translate over. You can try it with me along on some fake skin. You'll see the points. So right now I have 4 volts running, and obviously per second and minute my machine is going to be making a certain amount of rounds. Depending on the style that I'm going for will determine where I'm going to be sitting in the voltage range. What I am saying is, let's say if I'm going to be shading, I'm going to want to run a lower voltage because I typically shade with a single needle or a 3-round liner, a very tight needle, and I also layer up my shades as well. I personally need a lower voltage to accommodate for my style and my hand movements, as opposed to a higher voltage. This isn't definitive. We don't have to stay in a lower range for shading. We can navigate in the voltage range that best fits our wants and needs and suits our technique and technical application. I hope that you're following along with me here and really paying attention to this, what I'm saying. I know it's a lot, but I hope these fundamentals can kind of relate through this video cleanly. When I am running at a lower voltage for my technique, I have more time to work on the skin, which is one of the main reasons why I personally prefer to work at a lower voltage. So you can kind of see that I'm applying a whip technique here, and what I need to do is essentially layer up my shades as opposed to go straight on in like lining. It depends, once again, on the technique that I'm wanting, on the results that I am going for, and the style of tattoos that I am going to be doing. That's ultimately going to determine the voltage range. Now, it's not only the bare bone variable of the lower the voltage, the slower the needle, higher the voltage, the more rounds it's going to make. That's just the beginning variable. When we combine the voltage with our techniques, then things start changing. Let's say if we're going to be lining, well, obviously to accommodate for a slower round per minute or second, I'm going to have to move my hand slower, so that way my machine makes enough rounds to deposit the ink in a clean, solid, consistent, saturated manner. You can see for this design right here, I'm using a whipping technique here, so therefore running at a lower voltage makes sense to me while using very, very light whipping motions in certain directions. Another thing that I'm considering, and where the voltage really impacts, is you can see how fast I whip my hand determines how many dots get placed. So let's say if I'm moving fast in some areas and slower in others, then that's going to create a great inconsistency throughout my work over the course of the application. So right here, the variable of picking the right voltage to your style and technique, and the variable of paying attention to our hand motions and speed with the voltage are two unified variables that have to work together. I know it may sound like I'm rambling, however, I really like to be thorough and go in depth, just like I do within the book, the Fundamental Tattoo Handbook. I really go in and talk about multiple aspects. So you can see right here, I'm going for some stipple shading here and whip shading, and I'm essentially building up these softer areas. What I'm being mindful of is not only the voltage that I pick, I'm also being mindful of how fast my hand is moving, because I need every single dot to be placed a specific distance from one another in order to get that smooth shaded read. Another important variable on top of those two variables that I'm considering is how much pressure is initially applied. So I'm letting, as you can see, the tip of the ballpoint cartridge really just brush the paper, which allows me to layer up these tones, giving me a very smooth shade over layers here as I add them up. I'm not going straight in like I am lining. Now, I'm sure a lot of you are probably wondering, what does this have to do with voltage? And if you are, my answer to that would be every single thing. Voltage is probably one of the bare bone fundamentals that we should pay attention to from day one. We have to remember that when we're just starting, we don't know what voltage range we're going to be at. We probably don't even know the style of tattoos that we're going to be doing and that best suit our artistic abilities. So with that being said, I feel like focusing on voltage, especially early on, is going to be ideal. Picking out the right voltage for you and your lining and your shading is going to help you long term. Right here I have the Tattoo Practice Companion Workbook, which is also available on my Amazon author page. This one's full of beginner, intermediate, and advanced exercises from lining, shading, dot work, and everything in between. I've touched base on the importance of paying attention to our voltage because that pulls over to the entire technique. Now, I did it in context of shading, but I want to show you that what I'm saying here really translates to any technique that we're choosing to do. It doesn't matter if we're trying to pack, shade, dot work, stipple, realism, soft shade, hard shade, it doesn't matter. It's all going to come back to aligning our fundamentals, and one of the main fundamentals is voltage. So right now I'm going to be running at 4 volts. I'm not going to necessarily declare that I can't line at 4 volts. However, there could be adversities from lining at 4 volts. So let's say if I were to line right here, correct? From here to here. This is exactly the correct way that I would do it as if I'm tattooing on human or fake skin. However, running at a lower voltage like 4 volts is going to require me to not only move a little bit slower, however, that's going to require me to spend more time in a certain area. That is something to consider. Again, going back to when we first start out, I don't think we pay attention to these areas enough as beginners. Let's say if I were to go up to 5 volts, that means I get to move a little bit quicker in the areas that I'm going to be tattooing. This is all going to be deterministic by what feels best to us as the artist. So you can see from right here, here's my A point. I'm going to go ahead and navigate on over to my B point. And moving at 5 volts, you're going to notice that I did move a little bit faster because my ballpoint cartridge is making more rounds per minute per second. The same thing you're going to see. Now I'm going to go over here. So when I move my voltage higher, I have to accommodate for that faster voltage. If I don't, I'm going to risk scarring, textured healing, raised skin, more pain for the client. Let's say if I go up to 6 volts, you're going to notice how my hand is going to get naturally more faster because as you see right there, because I'm now accommodating to my speed here. This is right here definitive proof of why voltage is important, and being aware of voltage and actually putting thought into voltage should be thought about since day one. You can see I have to move way faster, if not I'm going to be ripping through the paper, which I'm currently not. I have to focus on my angle. If there's any place to make a mistake, it's within these books here. So you see though, as I'm going from 4, 5 to 6, I have to gradually pick up my hand speed. I'm going to go up to 7 volts now, and I'm going to do this as well, and then we're just going to move in correspondence to 7 volts. So you see, now I'm pressured to actually have to rush across the paper, which is going to make me more prone to mistakes. So knowing that, let's say if I'm just starting, or in general, if I have to move like this quick throughout the entire session, I'm going to make myself more prone to mistakes. So that right there should let me know that naturally, I'm probably going to be sitting at a lower voltage range when I line. So I'm going to jump back down to around 5.5 volts, and I want to move in a manner that's comfortable, that allows me to get optimal results. And all of this literally comes right back to voltage. So you can see at 5.5 volts, I get to slow down tremendously, which would also minimize any mistakes that I could potentially make. Now that is the idea. That right there is the literal importance of why we should be considering our voltage each and every time we tattoo. Over time, we will eventually find a voltage range that's comfortable for us, but that right there is definitive proof as to why we should be considering voltage. It's going to contribute to everything that comes after. Once again, it's going to be the same thing with any technique. So this is going to apply and translate over to pretty much any style, anything that we want to do. It's always going to come back to paying attention to the voltage that we use. So watch, for example, I'm going to go ahead and demonstrate a little bit of packing. I'm going to move down to 5 volts because packing I tend to have to work in an area a little bit more versus lining being in and out. So if I'm going to be packing at around 5 volts, I have a little bit more time to work in the area that I'm going to be packing. That's the reason why I'm choosing to run at 5 volts. So you can kind of hear my logic. This is going to be different for every single artist. Some artists may pack at 6, 6.2, 5, 5.3. You get the idea. What the idea is, though, selecting the voltage that allows me to feel comfortable enough to allow my needle to make enough rounds per second per minute to do what it needs to do. I'm going to say that again. The idea behind voltage is selecting a voltage that's I'm comfortable enough with to allow my needle to do what it needs to do. So for example, I'm going to go ahead and outline this circle here, and this is exactly how I would do it as if I am tattooing on human skin or fake skin, and I just begin packing in the middle. I feel comfortable with this voltage, so there's no reason why I would change it. Voltage isn't something that we have to overthink. It should be a natural feel. We should automatically get a feel for voltage, and we should listen to it and feel it out. If we have a feeling like it's too high, we may be doing damage, then lower it. It's better to start lower and work your way up to a voltage that's comfortable, as opposed to starting higher and then working down. Another fantastic example. This is going to be dot work. So with dot work, since I tend to kind of poke the areas, I typically go to a low voltage around 4 or 5 volts, simply because I am touching down in an area, and if I move a little bit slower, I don't want my needle to hit too many times in the same area, which is why I typically go for a lower voltage. And then what I do is I just simply dot my boundaries and then begin adding the dot work. This is actually on a side note, this is a very sufficient resource to practice with. We can do this anytime, any place. We can pair it with a pencil or a pen. We can use a pencil if we don't want to commit and to permanency within the books. We can also use a tattoo machine, as you see me doing here, and get the most out of our practice. Once again, these are my tattoo workbooks that are available on my Amazon author page. You can head on over to Amazon, type in Daniel Yuck, and they will be there. But you can see that the exact same rule of thumb would be applied here, even with dot work. The first thing that I consider, the very first thing that I'm thinking about is my voltage, and that's one of the first bare bone variables that I am considering is my voltage. My voltage is very, very important because everything else comes after that. So you can see with dot work as well, I went to a lower voltage for practical reasoning, simply because I can get more time and not make so many rounds per section, per dot input. The point of this video here is, if we're just starting out, voltage is one of the very first things that we really want to pay attention to. If you're just starting out, I would recommend starting with a lower voltage with any technique, whether it's 4 or 5 volts, and then work your way on up. It is much more efficient to start at a lower voltage, find out that you're moving way too slow or that your voltage is way too low, and then just simply up it a few volts. That's way more efficient than starting way too high, damaging whatever you're tattooing on, and then bumping it down. You want to ramp your way up to the voltage that's comfortable for you. That is one of the first things that as a beginner we should be considering, as everything else follows. There's no way around progress but through it. Now, I can go on all day about how important voltage is, but I do feel like I've touched base on several technical fronts with like dot work, a little bit of stipple shading, and some line work, a little bit of packing as well. And I do feel like I've delivered some of the crucial fundamentals to remember when it comes to the importance of voltage. And I do, at the very least, feel like I could shed some light on how important voltage actually is and why we should be paying attention to it, especially in our earlier days. Now, if I didn't touch base on something specific, or if you have any questions at all, I encourage you to please drop a comment down below. Rest assured, I'm going to be doing my absolute best to assist you in the best possible direction. If you found this video helpful, consider giving this video a thumbs up, as I would greatly appreciate your support. Consider subscribing to my YouTube channel, as it does help my channel as well, and I truly do appreciate you doing so. Having way too much fun here. Once again, these books are available. I've done an in-depth review on this if you want to know more about the Inlumino Electric Pro Dot Pin. That'll be it for this one. That's all that I have for you today. I appreciate you, your time, and your support. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you have a great day.